Hi everyone, I'm so happy that you're here to join me for the Way of the Animal podcast. This is really funny. I'm anxious about today's podcast, and today's podcast is about anxiety. And I have my husband here, Alastair.
Hello.
And yeah, we're going to talk about anxiety, which I'm anxious about. That's fun.
You see, now I was going to start out by asking you, how are you feeling?
Well, yeah, it's funny because we decided on this topic because I have been feeling more anxious recently, and it's an interesting topic to talk about. I've suffered with anxiety for all of my life, as far as I can remember. I've always had that worry and anxiety about life in general. Different things trigger me into feeling anxious. So we thought we'd talk about it.
Anxiety is one of those funny things because, I don't know, I suppose I probably do get anxious at times, but my maximum anxiety level is probably like you would consider it no anxiety. Yeah, I don't really know a lot about anxiety.
Have you not learnt a lot from being with me?
No comment. So what's it like to feel anxious?
For me, I think it's slightly different for different people, but there are similarities in how you feel. I just start to feel overwhelmed. And when I start to feel that, my breathing gets faster and I feel like I can't breathe. My heart rate, I'm sure, increases because I feel that, like, heart palpitations. I can feel I almost start to feel disorientated and I struggle to think. And like the coordination is like all my ability to function as a human just goes out the window. It's just suddenly I just feel incapacitated in any normal functioning way, and I struggle to think logically. You know, it's like my mind starts to take over in a way that's not helpful, and I have all the unhelpful thoughts and all the fears come up, and it's extremely overwhelming. And I notice even talking about it, I stop breathing there. And when it gets really bad, I get into a full panic attack, and that's where I really feel like I can't breathe, and I can't even describe it. It's just horrible, and it takes a lot to bring me back from that moment. But when I'm back, I feel a lot better. But yeah, I find it terrifying. Feeling anxious is terrifying.
It's interesting a few of the things you said there, because it seems like getting anxious brings up a lot of fears. Now, do a lot of fears cause anxiety? I suppose anxiety comes from a fear and then starts to build and then brings up more fears and feeds back on itself. And then, like you said there, you find it terrifying. So it's kind of this it just keeps itself going round and round and round. And the more anxious you feel, the more anxious you feel, the more fears you feel. And the more fears you feel, the more and it just builds on itself.
It gets that overacting, overthinking part of my brain starts going. And when that starts happening, it's just like constant thoughts that aren't calming.
Yeah, not helpful thoughts.
Yes. I noticed even this morning, I was on the dog walk, and my mind was starting to, and it just feels like I'm out of control of myself because it's a very physiological response to what's going on in my mind. And it feels like I'm completely out of control of my own body and mind and everything. It's just like I have no control over what's going on. And actually, I've been listening to a podcast by Andrew Huberman, and it was on, I think it was stress and anxiety, and he's very good because he's a neuroscientist, so he talks about your physiological, what your body is doing and what your mind is doing in that moment when you're feeling stressed and anxious. And actually something that I had not. I've come across a lot of helpful things, and I do a lot of helpful things to help me stay calm and help me stay focused on what's helpful for me. And that's just the day-to-day things that I can do to help me feel good. But his tool that he taught me in that podcast, the physiological sigh, is something that helps you to calm your body down in that instant. So when you are in that moment of feeling stressed and anxious and not feeling good, this will physiologically change how you feel. So then you get control of everything again and you feel better. And that was really interesting because for me, that when he talked about regaining the control of the mind and within that the body, it's easier to feel calmer again.
That kind of makes sense for me because of the way I deal with things very much in my own head. It's easy for me to be nervous about something, or probably a little bit anxious about something, if I'm doing something new or something challenging or something that could go wrong. But it's very, very easy for me to just go, no, it's okay. And there we go, that's it done. So what's the sigh?
Physiological sigh. So it's a deep inhale. He recommends you do it in through the nose and out through the mouth, but if you can't for any reason do it that way, then it doesn't matter as long as you do it in the rhythm he says, which is a deep inhale through the nose, followed by a little bit more of an inhale through the nose, and then a long, slow sigh outhale. And the important thing is to have the exhale. I said outhale, didn't I? Exhale to be slow, because there's different breathing techniques, and when you make your exhales longer than your inhales, that's calming. When you make your inhales longer than your exhales, then it's invigorating. So you need to remember the exhale's got to be longer. So I tried it. You just do it one to three times. Two or three times, just to calm yourself down, and what a difference. Instantly I felt better, and my thoughts stopped running away. I felt myself calming, and actually what it does, it's to do with your diaphragm and your heart, and it actually calms down your heart rate. And that's the physiological response to that breathing technique that helps you calm down. And for me it was, obviously, I wasn't monitoring my heart rate, but I felt my mind calm, and I felt more in control of myself again, and able to just feel calmer in that moment, and continued on. And then if it started to snowball again, then I would do it again. And so I've never tried that before until this morning. And this is kind of why we're talking about this as well, is it's a great tool. And
yeah, well, I know when I was doing studying hypnosis and things like that, it's a recognized technique for helping people to really relax. Is inhale for 3, exhale for 6. So it's just lengthening that exhale, and that really helps bring you down. So that's quite an interesting one. And it's good to have a little thing like that that's really easy to do.
I also I think it was I read the James Nestor Breathe book, and for panic attacks, because quite often it's actually gaining breath and breathing again during panic attacks is really hard. And one of the recommended techniques for that, which I did not know, because everyone always says, take a deep breath. You even say it to me, just take a deep breath. But at that stage, it's really hard to take a deep breath. But if you hold your breath,
then you have to take a deep breath.
Then you have to take a deep breath after. Okay. So if someone around you is having a panic attack and they're struggling to breathe, no, just tell them to hold their breath, and then they'll be able to breathe better, and it resets the system. So that was another interesting thing. I'm quite grateful that I haven't had a panic attack since I've read that, but if I do at some point,
you'll know to hold your breath.
That's what I'll be trying.
That's interesting. It's interesting how your sort of logical, critical thinking goes out the window when you start getting anxious. And
Yeah, I think it's that you are kicking in your flight or fight. And I like to add freeze to that, freeze, flight, or fright, because quite often...
That's definitely the three responses that we have.
Quite often I have a freeze response too, like I just want to shut down and do nothing. Like it's like I can't cope with anything and I just need to sit and do nothing. So that's my freeze response to the stress.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just want to get outside as a sort of a flight. But also I think the outside is the getting out in nature, and it's just outside. I just need to get outside the door. Changes how I feel very quickly. I feel like I can breathe again. And of course, I'm connected to the earth. I'm out in nature. All the things that people say are good for you and help you to reset. That just getting out the door helps me sometimes.
And we're very lucky because we live sort of quite rural. So getting out the door, it's very peaceful and... Yeah.
But I think just...
I don't know, for me, the thought of getting out the door if I lived in the middle of a city is like...
Still
fresh
air.
Not relaxing.
You're still outside though, aren't you?
You are still outside. Yeah. And I suppose if you live in a city, it's not as overwhelming as it could be if you live rurally.
And that's so something that I build on with the anxiety, because I've always felt the need to get outside to save myself. That's been one of my things, is getting outside makes me feel better, is feeling trapped. And that's that not being allowed or able to get outside. So, I mean, it goes back to doing exams, because you had to sit in there and you had to finish your exam and you weren't really allowed to leave. I mean, yes, you were, but you weren't allowed to leave, you know. That was an added fear to the anxiety of doing the exam, was feeling trapped that I had to sit in the room and do it. And even more recently when we did our English tests for coming over to Canada, and actually I felt the added pressure of, well, we had one day to do it and we're there to do it, and I could not let myself down or let you down by wanting to escape the room that I was, you know. So it's like, it's amazing, all this thing. And then when you go beyond that, there was also flying on the planes. You know, on a plane you can't just step out of a plane.
Well,
like,
you can, but it's not recommended.
It's worse than being in an exam room. You literally can't step out of a plane.
And that's the interesting disconnect with your critical and logical thinking. Because like the English exam, well, you speak English, you read English, you write English, you listen to English. So it's not a difficult task. It's something that you should be pretty good at. Your test results may differ, but...
I wasn't very good at listening, apparently.
I mean, usually I'm the one that gets in trouble for not listening, so...
I know.
Now we have proof that you don't listen.
Yeah, we have examination proof that I'm a poor listener.
But it's that thing. It's the inability to think about things because... And it probably actually affected your test scores. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who don't test well because they get anxious about it and then their brain goes out the window. And it's that interesting thing. I don't know. Because for me, I'm able to bring my mind back online. I'm able to very much control's not maybe a good word, but I can kind of affect the way things are going. And if I feel my brain starting to go off on a whatever, I can pull it back in. But when you get anxious, you can't.
Well, I can. I feel the more aware I am of my anxious feelings, the more I can see the markers of when I'm starting down the anxiety route. You know, I can see and I feel that I'm starting down that route, then I will do the things that I need to do to stop it before it gets to the point where... But there's some points where it just seems to run rampant. You know, it just...
gets away from you.
It totally gets away from me. And at that point, it's really hard.
So is it being aware of it and being able to sort of rationalize the fears that come up? And is that how it works? You're like, oh, well, it's not actually a likely outcome of this situation, or... Well,
I've learned, you know, that what you focus on
Definitely.
is what is coming, is what's happening. You know, you're creating your own reality.
And that's why you got anxious talking about being anxious.
Yes. I'm fully aware that thinking the worst and believing in the worst is not helpful. A, it's not helpful, and B, it can create that energy around things. And also, when you think that, I just keep you're building on the wrong, unhelpful energy and thought of what is or what could be, you know. You're just not helping yourself. So I know all this. But obviously when anxiety takes over, it takes over sometimes, and I just get blindsided, and I know it, and I'm trying my damnedest to stop it. But that was really great about that physiological sigh, was I stopped it. And that's really interesting, because that's been the most effective technique for stopping that. And it's funny how it's a physiological thing, but it actually stopped my mind dead. It just was like, nope, no more.
I wonder if that's because you kind of have to think about it. Kind of,
yes.
It takes your attention, your focus off of the building the anxieties and the fears, puts it onto something kind of nothing, but enough of a focus just to kind of make you switch off. I remember when I was working with that crisis text helpline thing, there was a wee GIF that they had, you know, like a little animation video, and it was for breathing. And it was just a little, I can't remember, was it a flower or a shape or something? And it was breathe in and it would grow, and then breathe out, and it would shrink down again, and then breathe in. And it just repeated itself. And even for me, someone who doesn't suffer from a lot of anxiety, when I watched that and put my breathing in sync with it, it really lowered me down to a really calm, relaxed level. Just that conscious focus on my breath.
Yeah, I love those. They're really nice because it's a visual. I'm quite a visual person. So because it's a visual and a physiological thing,
I think that's the thing, is it takes in two, like, more senses.
Yeah.
So I suppose if it had a sound to go with it as well, and a smell. I don't know. But
don't have smellophones.
Don't have smellophones. But yeah, if that would then take more of your brain power focusing on it, more of your senses focusing on it, and help reduce the stress levels. I don't know.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Anxiety for me is just, I think it's a weird thing. Because let's face it, you're anxious about something that hasn't happened, probably won't happen. So you're making up something to worry about.
But I think a lot of it is like, for me, I notice now that quite often the physiological comes first. And I've noticed for women out there, on my cycle, like the hormone changes in my cycle, actually, I find I know in the month where I am more vulnerable to being anxious.
Okay.
There's the times, and that's usually after day 10. It's just when my progesterone starts to drop.
Okay.
But also for more information, when women are getting older, perimenopause, menopause, the hormone cycles and all that changing, that can bring up. So there's people who have never had panic attacks or anxiety in their life, and it hits them in later in life, and that's the hormones changing, because hormones also obviously affect your emotions and your physiological state. So there's a lot, like, there's a whole wormhole of stuff, anxiety, and I have very little information about the true physiological goings on and all the hormones and how everything affects itself. And that's why I find the Andrew Huberman podcast interesting, and anyone else that is talking about these things, is it opens my eyes to understand more about me, my cycles, my life, and the anxiety. And there's still a lot that I can learn, but it's interesting when you become more aware and you almost map it out a bit. You can see where your triggers are. You can see whether your triggers are physiological or whether they're mental or emotional. What is actually causing you to have that kind of reaction, and then you can help yourself to understand that and help yourself to feel better within that, you know, and catch it. You'll just, rather than letting it run away with you.
So it sounds a bit like you sometimes with your anxiety, you feel it before you've sort of got any conscious. So it's like you get this little feeling, and it sounds a little bit like you get this little feeling. You're like, oh, what's that? And you start kind of pulling on that thread, and rather than just leaving it alone.
It's that way. I've spoken about before in the being highly sensitive. I'm a really, really sensitive person, like incredibly sensitive, in ways that I never fully understood until later in life. And I now realize that my friends or my family can be feeling anxious and think about me, and I feel their anxiety. So sometimes I'll just feel anxiety. I'll be like, is this mine? I actually have to ask, is this mine? And if it's not, then I let it go, and then it's helping them to let it go. And it's a strange connection thing, but it's how I do my distance healing, and we are all connected. And whether you believe it or not, that's what I feel.
That's even like for dullards like me. That if you are in a group of people and they are all angry or something like that, well, it's quite easy to fall into that angry feeling. It's very hard to go into a miserable room full of unhappy people and be all happy and change the feeling. It's very easy to get sucked in because you're feeling the
exactly.
The
and you'll feel as well. I'll feel it, and it's my animals. You know, one of the dogs is feeling anxious, and there's also the feedback loop where I'm feeling anxious, therefore one of the dogs feels anxious, and then I'm anxious because they're at, and there's like it's sometimes important to ask yourself the question, is this mine? Yeah. And go from there. And if it's yours, then be like, okay, well, what's triggered this, and how can I help myself feel better? And before you're even in that position of feeling anxious, now's the time to look at ways that help you feel better from being anxious. So, have that toolkit ready and practice your physiological sigh. And if you want to look up Andrew Huberman's podcast, I think it was Stress and Anxiety. It's a few years old now, about that physiological sigh, or just Google Andrew Huberman and physiological sigh or whatever, and it will come up. Yeah. Learn your tools before you get to your point where you're in that complete panic, so that you can know how to help yourself, and even train people around you to know how to help you. Because sometimes you get to this stage where you've lost all logical thought. Like I said, it's like this freeze, fight, flight, and you don't know how to help yourself, and you're gone. It's like you're gone. And so other people around you knowing how to help you helps too.
It's interesting that, because the whole freeze, fight or flight, you hear that talked about a lot, that so many people in their stressful everyday life, they kind of live in that perpetual fight or flight sort of anxiety level, and that's their baseline, just because the world of connected and everything is so stressful. If you let yourself get caught up on it, and you're constantly having to rush and move forward, and no one sits back and takes a breath.
Yeah. And it's like, it's really hard on your own psyche and your physiological body. You know, it's really hard on you if you're constantly in stress. And I think I always say, like, the first step is just becoming aware of how you are. And then you become more aware of little micro changes, and you can help yourself instantly.
Yeah, notice it before it gets away from you.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Interesting.
I mean, yeah, we could go on and on, but I think
it's very interesting, the feedback loops that you fall into, and the inability to sort of go, this isn't helpful, this doesn't serve me any purpose, or, this is something I have no control over anyway, so there's not much point in worrying about it. And I'm a big advocate for that. It's like, if you can't affect it, there is no point in worrying about it.
Yeah. And that's easy to apply when you aren't already very anxious.
I'm fully aware that it's very easy for me to say that when I'm not worked up and worried about stuff.
Yeah.
So out of curiosity, how do you feel anxiety level after talking about anxiety and how to deal with it. Is it worse? Is it the same? Is it less?
I feel a lot calmer, actually.
Interesting.
I just feel like it's easier now.
Is that because you've kind of brought your critical thinking and your logical brain back online to talk as a podcast? You're thinking of things to say and structuring sentences poorly.
Yes, saying outhale.
Saying outhale instead of inhale.
No, it was exhale. Outhale is exhale.
Yeah, that's the one. Never mind. See, I'm no good at it either.
Yeah, no, I think it is. It's also reminding myself that I have control over myself. That I know all this stuff, and like I don't need to let my mind go on its rampage of anxiety. I can just rein it all back in and bring back that center to who I am. It's just like I get disconnected from that calmness from within me when I get too much in my head.
It's kind of that, like you were saying, being aware. And sitting talking about it makes you aware, and I'm guessing kind of makes you go, well, that's silly to be in that feedback loop.
But the problem is like berating it and myself. So
that's definitely not helpful.
I always feel ashamed that what makes me feel anxious, it makes me very emotional. That simple day-to-day things that everyone does makes me feel very anxious sometimes. And I kind of feel a bit ashamed that that's how that is.
I don't think that's something to be ashamed about, because everyone has different feelings and different reactions to different situations. And I don't think feeling something is something you should be ashamed of, especially when you put so much effort and work into dealing with it in a helpful and constructive manner, rather than letting it control you. How do you feel now?
Emotional.
But again, that's also something that's all right, is to have emotions and let emotions out. Because, well, I'm not always great at it myself. I tend to just bottle things up. But I do feel like I let go of things quite well. But I can imagine trying to hold everything in would just become overwhelming. It's that, what's the analogy they use of holding a balloon under the water?
Yeah.
Just let go of the balloon.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah.
Comes back to that, just let go of it.
Yeah, just let it go. Yeah.
Just let it go. It's so easy. Just let it go. Jeez.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've kind of...
It was interesting.
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking about it. It's something that I think a lot of people on the quiet struggle with.
I think there's a lot of people that don't talk about it, but I think there's even more people that just aren't aware of it. Maybe I'm one of those people. But that they are anxious, or they've got quite a high level of anxiety and stress in their day, but they don't notice it. And I don't think that's healthy.
No, I think that because then you're living in that survival state the whole time without realizing that that's how you are. And it's only then when something happens that they realize that that's what's happened, or they're in that survival stress state and then they finally stop, like they go on holiday and then they get sick.
Yeah.
Because obviously when you're stressed, your body's actually in that I will keep you, your immune system's actually going really well. It's like it protects you from getting sick, and then when you stop, that's when you get sick. So that's when you realize how you've been the last while.
That's it. It's your body is in the fight, the threat, the lion that's going to come in the cave and eat you. And it's just keeping you pumping and keeping you going. And then when you relax, your body's like, oh my God, I'm done. And
obviously it's not good to be in that state all the time. Where that state's meant to be a very quick, you've run away from the lion, you survived and you're done.
Yeah.
Not constant.
Not for several years while you're in a stressful job or situation.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So relax, do your physiological breaths.
And physiological sigh.
Physiological sigh.
Yeah. And then look at other tools that you can use just to bring down your stress and know how to calm yourself even at the end of the day at work, have routines that allow you to come down from work. That and just so that you give your body the break.
That's it. The one I always have to remind myself is to take time.
Yeah.
Just eat, and that doesn't mean don't do anything for me. It means even the task I am doing, do it a little bit slower than I could do it, so I'm not rushing through it, and that helps with everything.
Yeah, that you're allowed to slow down, which is my meditation and what I talk about in the podcast last week.
There you go.
Slowing down.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think this is why that podcast came up, was because I was starting to get into that high stress
and not allowing yourself to slow down.
Yeah, not slowing down, and then within that then I got to the stage where I'm in high anxious feelings and stress, and just it's time to come down.
There you go.
So, well, thank you for chatting with me today.
It's quite all right.